Welcome to Distro Podcast.
Colleen, welcome to the Distro Podcast, and thank you for being a guest on this episode. For anyone listening in, Colleen Johnson is the CEO of prokanban.org. So check it out. Colleen, we'd love to have you share as much or as little as you'd like to about your background, experience, and then we'll transition from there to learning more about ProKanban.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Andrew. I'm excited to chat with you about all of this today. I started out my career in IT about 25 years ago. I kind of fell into it. It wasn't what I went to school for. And I started out in QA, so quality assurance and manual software testing. And that got me really quickly exposed to kind of the entire software development life cycle and what typically goes into that, and more from a waterfall perspective, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, which meant a lot of waiting for work to make it to me. And then a lot of kind of frantic testing to find as much wrong with it as we could in the shortest amount of time possible so that we could ship things to our customers. I think when Agile first became a thing in early 2000s, and we started looking at maybe better ways of working where we could bring testing closer to development, we saw, myself included, that a lot of people that were in the quality assurance space really gravitated towards Agile practices because we had been kind of at the the receiving end of all of that pain for such a long time. So it made sense that we wanted to really see that process get shorter and tighter and more collaborative with the development folks. And so I became a Scrum Master and started learning more about Agile practices. And I think, I liked my role as a Scrum Master. It got me into a lot of great startups in the Denver community, but I always felt a little bit like the team mom, which wasn't another job I was looking for. I have 3 kids. I didn't need that at work too. And so, I think I kind of stumbled into learning about Kanban around, 2007, 2008-ish. And I really fell in love with it because of all the data behind it. So, it became a very different conversation to have, not just with development teams, but with, leadership, product folks, executives, to really be able to root a lot more of our decision-making in data and have a very different conversation. So it was less about what you think is highest priority or what I think is highest priority or what needs to change. All of the decisions were really grounded in what are we hearing from customers? What are we measuring? What are we learning? And how do we use that data to drive decision-making, not just at the highest level of work, but even down to the teams, right around, you have capacity to work on something new today. What should the highest priority item be for your bandwidth to go towards? So that's really what brought me into the Kanban space. And then I started bringing Kanban into a lot of the teams I worked with, both at the team level and then at the portfolio level, and then moved into consulting, I think, as most people tend to do there. And then in 2018, my husband and I founded Scatterspoke, which is a tool that really originated in retrospectives and how can we get better retrospective information from teams, but has kind of evolved into really an insight engine that does a lot of what I guess we used to do manually, right? Of taking data out of ADO or Jira and saying, here's what data we have about how the teams are performing, but what are they saying? Marrying those two things up to be able to provide insights to the teams on what things might need their attention. So that plunked me straight into a more product-focused role, and I got to go through the journey of VC and fundraising and all of that side of being a founder, which is humbling to say the least. Like, you might love your idea, but having to pitch it in front of the people that have the money will really knock you down a few notches pretty quickly.
Yes, it will.
Yeah. So we took money from the Atlassian Ventures program and a few angels in a very early round, and that that whole experience just was sobering, humbling. Like, you just learn so much so quickly about what you're trying to build when you have to pitch it and sell it and be in the hot seat there. So my journey from Scatterspoke then brought me into the founding role at ProKanban in 2020. And I joined up with Daniel Vacanti, who is very well known in the space as kind of the thought leader behind actionable agile and probabilistic forecasting for software development work. And we came together with some folks in kind of late 2019 who wanted to create a guide for how to practice Kanban and kind of some fundamental things that could be a reference for a lot of teams that were interested in applying this way of working. And then we used that guide to basically launch prokanban.org as an organization and community around learning Kanban practices and teaching others how to put it into place in their organizations.
Very cool. So just to backtrack a little bit, your first startup, remind me the name of it again?
Scatterspoke.
Scatterspoke.
Yeah.
Is that still going? Like, is that still like in operation?
It is still in operation. And, I think it's kind of the very, survival story to some extent of how important it is for products to be able to adapt. Retrospectives at the time when we launched it, when we first launched the tool, it was really, my husband wanted to try some different coding languages out. And I was like, oh, I have a very unique need where when I go into work with clients and they're all distributed, I need a way to gather this information easily from people in different locations and have a way to review it. And so it kind of just spun up as like a kind of a pet project for both of us. And then at one point we were playing around with creating a login for it. So people had to register to use it, and it was all just free. And one day we went and looked at the logs, and we had like 30,000 people registered using it. We were like, holy shit.
You're onto something.
Yeah, we're onto something here. And so we really started adding a lot more features and using a lot of the opportunities I had where I was consulting to get feedback on the product and what people liked or didn't like. But then, I think when COVID hit, we were like, oh my God, we're going to be millionaires, right? Everybody's going to be forced to work from home and everybody's going to need this tool. I guess what we didn't anticipate was that every tool vendor on earth would build this into their products and a lot faster than we'd be able to, right? We had a small team of 5 developers. And so we had to pivot really quickly to stay alive, basically, which was what's the one thing we have that maybe some of these bigger and more funded tool vendors don't have. And the answer was a lot of data, right? We were sitting on all this data about how teams work and about where their pain points were and what needed resolved and often doesn't get resolved for them. And so we used that to kind of create our own machine learning work behind the scenes to say, these are the types of conversations and patterns and things that are coming up for teams and the kind of nuance and context that's often missing from a lot of the data, so that we could create this whole insights engine then to be able to say, if you're seeing your cycle time going down for one of your teams and your team's talking about cross-team dependencies being a blocker, those two things may be related. And this is something that somebody should go look into further. And it's timely now, unfortunately and fortunately for us, unfortunately for a lot of organizations where there's been mass layoffs, because a lot of organizations are cutting agile roles right now. And they're saying we don't see the value in having dedicated Scrum Masters or dedicated agile coaches. And really Scatterspoke's able to kind of fill that void because it can gather retro feedback asynchronously. It can gather feedback in Slack, right? All the places where you're already having those conversations now, it's pulling that data in and matching up that data with Jira or ADO metrics. So it's unfortunately for people, I think helping keep the wheels on that continuous improvement practice, even if there's not somebody there to facilitate it.
Yeah, very interesting. So have you stepped out of that company then, and in 2020, you just kind of went all in on Pro Kanban, and that's your thing now. That's what you're doing full time.
Yeah, definitely. So I stepped out of Scatterspoke as much as you can. My husband's the CEO now. We still work a lot and share ideas and share experiences of what we're seeing in the industry, and really fun dinner table conversations in this house.
I bet.
Yeah. And I stepped into the CEO role for Pro Kanban in 2020. So that's my full-time focus now.
Very cool. What are the team dynamics for both, for Scatterspoke and for Pro Kanban?
Yeah, in both organizations, we have very distributed teams. I think for Scatterspoke, a lot of the development resources are in South America, which is really, exciting, I think, to be able to build a team that's international like that and working on a product that's built for distributed teams. I think that's really important, right? It's kind of giving you the exposure to the people using the tools too. And then with Pro Kanban, since we're kind of I would say a learning aggregator where we're building out all of the content and licensing our materials to trainers who then can use those materials for coaching and teaching their clients or inside of their internal organizations. And so our core team is just 5 of us, but we have 130 trainers in over 35 different countries and offering classes in almost 20 different languages. So
That's so cool.
definitely very global and very distributed. And
So is a trainer equal to like a contractor that represents and pushes your guys' content and education?
yeah, exactly. And so there's kind of 2 different paths a trainer can take with us. Some of them are independent consultants who go and they work with their clients to figure out if this content makes sense for them, and then they can bring that content into their clients. And a lot of those consultants will offer public facing classes where they can go sign up at it, like you can go to the website, pick a class and just go register at your leisure. And then we also have a lot of internal trainers. So a big company may say, we're going to take this entire team of project managers and make all of them Pro Kanban trainers so that inside of our organization, they're teaching consistently across every group that they interact with. And so sometimes that comes in through learning and development, through HR. Sometimes it comes in through technology. It really just depends. And in those cases where we're building out these enablement programs, it's really us partnering with the company to make sure that they're getting the customization they need in the content to make sure that it fits their context. So, we can come and teach Kanban to any company, but what matters when really you're trying to implement all of these practices is that the folks in the classroom understand how it applies to the work they're doing, and that screenshots match the screens that they're using, language of how the work structure is broken down all matches up. And so we really try to customize a lot of the content for those enablement programs to fit the client's needs. And that way we know that there's hopefully more stickiness in what we're teaching.
Got it. Very interesting. And then last, I guess, just a follow-up question on that. So with Pro Kanban, are you guys are your trainers, do you guys house the demand for the consulting work and then distribute that to your trainers? Or are the trainers bringing in the opportunities and, how do you guys monetize, and grow? What does that look like?
It's a little bit of both. So people can reach out directly to prokanban.org and say, hey, we want to build up this internal enablement program, or they can say, I just want to run a private class. And in those cases, we partner with them to understand, is it in person? Is it a specific language need or time zone need? And pull in local trainers to help partner with them so that they have local resources to mentor them through that process. And then in some cases, the trainers are bringing that work. So they might say, I already have an existing client that I have a partnership and a relationship with, and I'm going to bring Pro Kanban into this client. And we see that a lot too, where especially if you've been in a consulting role for quite some time, typically they've got their own book of business. This is something they're bringing to kind of bring a new offering into the clients that they've already had or already worked with. So it's a little bit of both.
In that instance, are these trainers licensing your program or your content?
Yeah, exactly. So they pay a license fee to us, and then they pay a student fee to us each time they teach. And so those fees are kind of what drive the back end of the Pro Kanban revenue stream.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Transitioning a little bit here. So you've got 2 startups you've been involved with of your own. You mentioned that with Scatterspoke, it's a very distributed team across even other countries and also in a lot of ways with Pro Kanban. What has been your experience so far with putting together the foundational key team members? Like, how did you find them? And what was your experience in like identifying that they are the right person, and are they still with you?
Yeah. Well, I think the first part here is community, right? And that's a big part of what we try to drive on the Pro Kanban with the Pro Kanban team is this sense of community. I think for a lot of what we do now, whether you're an independent coach or consultant or in an organization, the reality of it is we're often working at home alone without a lot of human interaction. And so, I think having things like, we have like a pet channel in Slack, or we have like, celebrations or holiday things where we try to share things other than just what we're working on with each other so we can get to know each other. All of those little things are the things I think we're missing right now by not going into an office maybe, or getting to connect in person every day. And so trying to create a strong community, I think, is really at the core of what we're doing. And then all of that, we do for Pro Kanban, we do trainer connects all around the world. We just had one in August in Budapest. We had one in June in London. And that gives us a chance to get to meet each other in person. And, we do a day of working together, but then we also try to do a community give back event where we go volunteer together somewhere, wherever we're all coming together, where we try to give back to the community that's hosting us. And then we all go out, for a fun dinner. And so those kind of things, I think, also really help build a strong community. And, it's fun we get to know everybody through Slack and through Zoom. But then getting to go meet everybody in person and really get to know them.
Those are like what workshops that you guys host in those areas?
Yeah. So we do, typically we'll do those, we call them trainer connects. We do them alongside of like a conference or a class where we know that a lot of people will be coming together anyway. And then we run a 1-day workshop with our trainers where we're kind of revisiting content or talking about strategy. And then in the afternoon, try to do a volunteer give back event before we go have fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. A little change of pace here. Have you had a negative experience with a foundational, like early stage core team member?
Yeah, definitely. We did with Scatterspoke, unfortunately. And, I think it's hard to know. I think there's a couple things, right? It's hard to know when you're starting out what to look for. Especially when the team is small and scrappy and you're often strapped for financial resources, right? You might not be able to hire the people that are demanding the most salary early on. And so you're doing a little bit of training as you go. And I think one of the hardest parts about startup life is you might be hired for a really specific role, like marketing or sales. But because you're probably working in a really small team that's very scrappy, you have to wear a lot of different hats. And I think as a leader in those things, I feel like I've learned this kind of the hard way, is you have to be really clear about what you're asking people to do and where times you're asking, like at times where you're asking them to step outside of maybe what their bulleted job description is, because you need that. You need people that are willing to be like, I don't know anything about marketing, but I'm going to go figure out how to run a LinkedIn ad for this event. Or I don't know anything about sales, but I'm going to hop on this call because I have a connection to this company from a previous employer, whatever. But I think it's very easy when you're hiring people to be like, you're going to be the director of sales and here's what I expect you to do. And then there can be conflict that comes up when you're asking people to maybe step outside that box. And so I think this has come up for me in past roles. It comes up for me all the time with Pro Kanban too, is that we have to constantly revisit, like, what are we doing right now? What's our focus for the next couple months? And maybe even though your title is one thing, your focus is going to be in this area for the next couple weeks, because that's where we need support. And I think that's very true, kind of regardless of what your startup is that you've got to wear a lot of different hats early on, because we don't have a team of 500 people backing this company right now, right? It's scrappy.
Yeah. Like you said, especially with early stage companies, like, you almost have to set the expectation with any hire that you bring on, regardless of their role. Like you said, like, hey, this isn't just going to be a sales role. Like, that's what we are bringing you on for, but you're probably going to be doing some other things too. Or
Right.
this isn't just going to be an engineering position. You're probably going to have to do some product management as well, and maybe some design stuff here and there. It's like it's hard because some people are like the right people are so excited about that. Like they they want to broaden their skill set, or learn something new, or get comfortable being uncomfortable. And then there's a lot of people that are like, sorry, no, I just want to do this one thing. So I imagine that you've had some interesting experiences across the board there.
Well, and I think too, you
Yeah.
add in the global aspect of that, right? And it sounds sexy on paper to be like, we're all over the world, right? We have people that we're interacting with in all these different countries. But the reality of even that part is that we're getting messages in the middle of the night and at 5 a.m. And I think having some expectations around like who fields what, if something comes up at Slack and it's 3 a.m., you don't have to respond to it, but we do need to respond to it by the end of their business day or whatever. Like those
Yeah.
things, all stuff that I feel like I certainly didn't think about early on in the organization of the company, and they came up in ways where we were like, oh God, this is something we didn't really think of or address early on, and now we need a plan for how we're going to handle this so that we don't burn anyone out too. And so I think it's all those things too. It's like kind of learning. I always tell everybody, sometimes I learn the hard way, right? I'm gonna screw some stuff up, and that's how we're going to figure out that we need better policies around how to handle this stuff. But as long as I think we turn some of those failures into better ways of working, I think it's a good learning opportunity.
Yeah, fail fast, fail early, learn fast, learn early, right? Like
Yeah.
that's it takes a unique person to be able to handle that, and to see that as like an opportunity. So good on you for that. Now, regarding like on that same topic of like these global teams that you've built, where are you finding them? Like how are you going about identifying, like finding these people in other countries, and then what's that experience been, interacting and bringing them on board? Like what's all that looked like for you guys?
Yeah, for our trainer community, I would say a lot of people find us. And in some cases we probably do far less recruiting than we do vetting people. A lot of the trainers have taken a class or have been following our work and are just really passionate about what we're doing and how it's different. Or they've been close to the community. Our Slack community is open to the public. And so a lot of people start there. They'll start in Slack and ask questions and kind of engage with the community in Slack before applying to become a trainer. And then once people apply to become trainers, they have to meet a bunch of criteria around the classes they've taken. All of our courses come with an assessment. And so they have to hit a certain assessment score in order to apply. And then they do an interview with our director of community operations. And then once they've gone through those steps, they typically do a peer review. And the peer reviews give other trainers a chance to vet the new trainers, which I think is really important. If we're trying to build a strong, diverse community, it can't just be my opinion of whether or not people are coming in. So we try to have 3 or 4 different trainers on every peer review alongside with some of the PK leadership team who then vet those trainers coming in. And when we do the peer reviews, we ask the trainer candidates to teach a section of our course. We try to be really difficult students and ask questions that we've seen in the past, or maybe more obstinate students who just want to argue about, this doesn't make sense and convince me otherwise. And so we're trying to see how the trainers handle those, more difficult situations. And not everybody passes those the first time. We have situations where sometimes people pass and we're like, yes, go teach. You're officially a pro Kanban trainer. In some cases, we ask them to maybe go back and clarify something they taught or come back with a little bit more material, and redo their peer review. And in some cases, we pair them up with mentors, where we feel like if there's specific things they need to spend more time practicing, whether it's teaching or content, or just understanding of different areas of our content, then we'll pair them up with a trainer who kind of mentors them through that process until they're ready to reapply. And so we really try to make it supportive, and it's very rare that we tell somebody, no, you cannot like no and have a nice day. It's usually no and here's all the things we'd like to do, or not yet, here's all the things we'd like to do to support you on your journey. So I think, kind of going back to what we were just talking about, all of those things make for a really strong community because we're pulling current trainers into the process of vetting new trainers. And so they have a vested interest in kind of protecting what they've built too. So it's not just up to me to decide who gets in.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I think that kind of process in an interview type, situation, put them on the spot in a direct setting, right? Like where it's like when we hire here with Distro, it's often like, hey, you're going to have an assignment regardless of the role, and it's going to be directly related to what you would do in your, in the job.
Right.
Because then you can see how like, even with the most nerves they're probably going to have, like how do they respond? Like how do they operate with that? And then with Scatterspoke, like what's that look like? Building those teams. I think you mentioned Latin America. Yeah, like how did they come to you, or how did that all work out for you guys?
That was more of a recruiting process because those were more developer-based roles. And so we worked with a recruiting firm that helped us like reach out to candidates that were interested in the space, and that had the right stack of languages and skills for what we were hiring for. And it was interesting. It was like once we found the first developer, he was in Brazil, and it was like, well, he had a referral and he had a referral and he had a referral, which I think is awesome, right? I think people like working with people that they know and that they know work well, that they work well with. And so that was kind of a really cool way to bring a really strong team together that already had some background and not having to start from scratch and building up that kind of teamwork ability. Yeah. So that was a really cool it was like once one domino fell, we were like, oh, now we have a whole team.
I had a full conversation with a CTO of a larger company here about this exact thing. He's like, man, it's like 90% likely that if we get a direct referral from one of our people, particularly he was referencing engineering, he's like, that they've worked with and they trust and know, he's like, usually we just hire them. Like we'll do like one interview.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's cool, very interesting. So, well, as we wrap up on this episode, I like to finish with like a final question of if you could share with us either advice and or a lesson learned in building your foundational teams for both companies. One of them doesn't matter, but either some advice or a lesson learned.
I mean, I think the biggest thing is some transparency and humility, right? And so in building these teams, especially at a startup point with both products and companies, like it's hard, right? And there's a lot of ups and there's a lot of downs and there's a lot of emotion that comes with all of the things that we're talking about, right? There's 1 month is really great and I feel like things are going really well, and the next month is not great. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't think we're going to make payroll, right? I try to be really honest with my team and tell them exactly where we are at all different times in that journey. And sometimes that's hard and it sucks. And I feel like I'm letting them down. Or like I've made a bad decision, and I try to share that with them, right? Like I'm trying to build trust, and I'm trying to build a cohesive team that's in, like everything we were talking about at the beginning. If you're willing to jump in and wear a lot of different hats and play a lot of different roles, you want to feel like you're valued. And I think that value comes from that transparency, right? I want to create a relationship with the team that I've built where they trust me to tell them what's going on. There's not a lot of surprises. And I'm also not blowing a lot of smoke, right? Like I want them to feel like they know exactly where we are as an organization and where we're going next. And so I think sometimes that means admitting I've screwed something up, or sometimes sharing news that's not not all sunshines and rainbows.
Yeah.
And so that's really, I think, the best thing that you can do as a founder is create a lot of transparency with the team.
Yeah, that's great advice and lesson learned, right? Like we see often people that like leaders that have this initiative to be transparent, but a lot of it's how you deliver that, and then what your game plan is post transparency. Like if you're just trying to share information just to make sure everyone's aware of what's exactly happening, that can be great or detrimental. But when a leader, like sounds like what you do, is you share the transparency with the objective of, so let's either collaborate to make this even better, or collaborate to solve and fix and bridge a gap if there is one.
Right.
And I see that working all the time, like all the time. So great advice there. Well, Colleen, thank you so much for being our featured guest on the episode. Again, anyone listening in or viewing this, Pro Kanban and Scatterscope.
Yeah.
Scatterscope. Look them up. And it sounds like you guys are doing some awesome stuff. So thanks again for participating. Appreciate your time.